The morning sun gleamed off the manicured lawns of Maplewood Estates, a pristine neighborhood run by one of the most overzealous HOAs in the state. And at the center of it all was Karen Thompson, the self-proclaimed guardian of community order. Every week, she patrolled the cul-de-sacs like a hawk, clipboard in hand, ready to cite someone for an unapproved garden gnome or slightly faded mailbox paint. But today, she wasn't hunting violations. Today, she was the victim. Karen had accidentally locked herself out of her house. Her keys, as she loudly explained to anyone within earshot, were trapped inside next to her freshly baked zucchini muffins. "This is outrageous," she shrieked at the HOA president, Mr. Douglas, who was calmly sipping his coffee on his porch. "Karen," he sighed, "we don't keep spare keys for individual homes. That's your personal responsibility." Karen gasped as though he had just denied her oxygen. "Excuse me? I was told when I moved in that the HOA kept emergency access keys for all residents. It's in the handbook." "That handbook was written in 1999, Douglas replied. "We stopped doing that years ago after a privacy lawsuit." Unmoved, Karen demanded that he produce the key. Immediately. After a long back and forth that drew several curious neighbors out of their homes, Douglas relented. "Fine. Let's check the storage room. But I'm telling you, there's nothing there." They walked to the HOA's maintenance shed, a place more suited for lawn equipment than confidential keys. Dust motes danced in the sunlight as Douglas rummaged through boxes labeled holiday lights and paint samples. Then, tucked in a small cardboard box labeled community essentials, he found a set of plastic keys on a bright red ring. "Here," he said dryly, holding them up. Karen's eyes lit up. "Finally. See? I told you the HOA is supposed to help its residents." She snatched the keys and strutted back to her door, triumphant. Douglas opened his mouth to protest but decided to let reality teach its lesson. Karen inserted the key into her front door lock, turned it, and the key bent instantly. A faint squeak echoed. She frowned, tried again, and the key snapped in half. Her neighbor, Mrs. Lopez, peered over the hedge. "Karen, that looks like a toy key from a child's playset." Karen froze, staring at the broken plastic in disbelief. Printed faintly on the side were the words Tiny Tots Hardware Set, ages 3+. Her jaw dropped. "The HOA gave me a toy key," she screamed, waving it in the air like a scandalous headline. And thus began what would soon be known as the Great Key Fiasco of Maplewood Estates. 2 days later, the HOA meeting room was packed. The usually dull monthly gathering, where topics like mulch, color and fence height dominated, was now standing room only. At the center table sat Karen, a thick binder of evidence stacked before her. "I demand accountability," she declared, slapping a photo of the broken toy key onto the table. "This is negligence, pure and simple." Across from her, Douglas rubbed his temples. "Karen, for the last time, those weren't real keys. They were part of the old Community Kids Day toy giveaway from years ago. Somehow, they ended up in storage." "Well, that's a security breach," Karen barked. "What if I had an emergency? What if someone else thought they had a real spare key and got hurt trying to break in?" "You tried to break in with plastic," muttered a board member under his breath. The crowd snickered. Karen shot them a glare sharp enough to slice glass. "This isn't funny. I expect the HOA to cover the cost of my lock replacement and emotional distress. I've been humiliated." Douglas took a deep breath. "Karen, no one owes you anything. You acted on your own misunderstanding." But Karen wasn't done. She flipped to a tab labeled Legal Options. "I have already contacted my attorney," she announced proudly. "If the HOA doesn't issue a formal apology and reimburse me for damages, I'll take this to small claims court." A collective groan filled the room. Mrs. Lopez raised a hand timidly. "Karen, dear, maybe you should just..." "Don't dear me," Karen snapped. This is about principle. At that moment, the HOA secretary, Jim, stood up holding his phone. Karen, he said awkwardly. Someone posted the whole thing on the neighborhood forum. There's already a meme of you yelling, "The HOA gave me a toy key." It's kind of viral. Karen's face drained of color. Viral. He nodded. Like. Thousands of shares. The room erupted into laughter. Douglas leaned back, half amused, half horrified. Karen stood, trembling with indignation. I will not be mocked. You'll all regret this when my story hits the local news. And with that, she stormed out. Binder under her arm, leaving a wake of whispers and stifled giggles. No one knew it then, but this was only the beginning. Karen wasn't just going to fight the HOA. She was about to turn Maplewood Estates into a battlefield of suburban vengeance, and the internet was watching. Within 48 hours, the video had spread across social media. Someone had uploaded it under the title, HOA Karen vs. the Toy Key. The clip showed Karen dramatically waving the broken plastic key while shouting about negligence and rights of homeowners. The comments were merciless. She really thought Fisher-Price made master keys. Imagine suing over a toy. Maplewood Estates HOA deserves hazard pay. Karen, however, saw herself as a martyr. This is defamation. She told her husband, Frank, who had perfected the art of nodding without engaging. They're twisting the truth. I was standing up for every homeowner who's ever been wronged. Sure, honey, Frank mumbled from behind his newspaper. Fueled by online notoriety, Karen launched a crusade. She started a Facebook group called Justice for Homeowners Against Incompetent HOAs, where she posted daily rants and live-streamed updates about her case. Her followers, mostly fellow HOA skeptics and chaos enthusiasts, cheered her on. Meanwhile, Douglas and the board scrambled to contain the damage. We're being review-bombed on Yelp, groaned Jim. Someone edited our page to say we hand out toy tools instead of keys. Douglas sighed. Just ignore it. The internet will move on. But Karen wasn't letting it die. She contacted the Maplewood Gazette to tell her exclusive story. The journalist tried to stay professional as she described the toy key incident. But even the headline betrayed the absurdity. HOA confusion leaves resident locked out, with plastic key. It went national within days. Morning talk shows chuckled over it. Late-night comedians slipped it into their monologues. Karen basked in the attention, until reporters started asking questions she couldn't answer. Did the HOA really give you the key, or did you take it from storage yourself? Why did you assume it was official when it was clearly labeled as a toy? Karen's confident smile began to falter. Meanwhile, her neighbors were growing tired of the circus. Mrs. Lopez started closing her curtains whenever she saw a news van. Kids playing outside pretended to unlock invisible doors. Giggling, "Look, I'm Karen." One morning, Karen found her front yard decorated with dozens of plastic toy keys hanging from the mailbox. A handmade sign read, "Maplewood's most secure home." That was the final straw. Karen called an emergency meeting, vowing revenge, not just against the HOA, but against the entire neighborhood. And this time, she wasn't just bringing a binder. She was bringing a plan. Karen arrived at the next HOA meeting in full battle mode. She wore a blazer the color of righteous fury and carried a briefcase stuffed with documents. This community has lost its integrity, she announced as she slammed the briefcase on the table. Douglas looked weary. Karen, what now? I have compiled a full list of HOA violations committed by every single homeowner in this neighborhood, she said, eyes gleaming. If the HOA refuses to acknowledge its negligence, I'll expose everyone's infractions. No one is safe. The room went silent. Karen, said Mrs. Lopez gently, you're only making things worse for yourself. Karen ignored her. She opened the briefcase. Dramatically, and dozens of toy keys spilled out onto the table. A collective laugh rippled through the room. Karen froze, horrified. Who did this? She sputtered, scooping up the colorful keys. This is vandalism. Tampering. Someone's trying to sabotage my evidence. Jim couldn't hold it in anymore. He burst out laughing. Karen, maybe it's poetic justice. Even Douglas cracked a smile. Looks like the universe is trying to tell you something. But before the laughter could settle, Karen made one last desperate move. She reached for her phone, went live on social media, and pointed the camera toward the table. See this? She cried. This is how the HOA treats whistleblowers. They mock me, they. Then, from behind her, a small voice interrupted. Mrs. Thompson. It was Mia, the 8-year-old from down the street, clutching an empty toy toolbox. I think those are my keys. My dad said someone took them from our garage after the block party. The room fell into stunned silence. Karen blinked, looked down at the bright red ring of toy keys, and realized they weren't even the same ones from the shed. Douglas exhaled slowly. Karen. Maybe it's time to let this go. Her livestream viewers watched in real time as the color drained from her face. The comments poured in faster than ever. This is painful to watch. She stole from a kid. Karen, please stop. That night, Karen quietly deleted her accounts. The memes kept circulating, but eventually, the internet moved on. Weeks later, she began keeping to herself, no more patrols, no more meetings. She planted roses along her fence. And for the first time in years, her neighbors saw her smile without a clipboard in hand. When a new neighbor moved in next door, Karen greeted them warmly and offered some advice. Always keep a spare key, she said with a rueful chuckle. And make sure it's real. The neighborhood never forgot the legend of the toy key, but neither did Karen. After all, sometimes the key to peace isn't control. It's learning to laugh, especially at yourself.